preservation on here. But Councilmember Shropshire, I'll let you go ahead and introduce, and that you have invited the Preservation Alliance to come and speak with us.
Thank you. I want to ask the East Point Historic Save the Block Preservation Alliance to come up and give a presentation on the National Trust for Historic Preservation when they went in to do a tour of the buildings, what were the findings, and how the buildings can be saved.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vicki Chung. I'm the president of the East Point Preservation Alliance. Thank you all for having us tonight. Thank you, Councilwoman Shropshire, for the invitation, and all of you for your attention. As you all know, the East Point Preservation Alliance, the Georgia Trust, and Southface did conduct a tour of all three of our historic buildings on Friday, July 24th. So I have with me the president and CEO of the Georgia Trust, as well as East Point resident, and I'm sorry, Shane, what is your title? The Director of Commercial Sustainability Services at Southface Energy Institute, Shane Totten. Thank you again to City Manager Gardner, who participated in the tour and gave us his time and his input that day. I'm just going to pass the floor over to Mark, who is going to present the findings of our tour, and then Shane will take it from there, and I'll say a few words after they present on the potential economic impact of revitalized and restored theaters.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Madam Mayor, members of Council, for the opportunity to work in East Point along with your city manager, your staff, and for the access to the buildings. We really appreciate this opportunity, and thank you for your attention tonight. I'm going to just really give you a summary, hit the high points of what's in the report, and I hope you all have a copy of the report. As Vicki said, we had full access to the buildings. We then left the buildings with our team, and the team members' names are on page 17. We paid some of the architects to work on the project. We also had some volunteer assistants, but we had a really outstanding team of people, multidisciplinary, included a person with extensive construction experience and historic rehabilitation, and also a professional estimator, someone who has 25 years of looking at buildings, both new buildings, old buildings, and figuring out what it will cost to repair them. And so we feel very good about what we are presenting you tonight, feel that it is factual, and think that the cost estimates are quite realistic, and even in some cases generous. Feel that maybe it's a possibility to do it for even less money. So conclusions were, and they're on page 3 in the executive summary, that all three buildings, the East Point City Hall, the City Auditorium, and the Old City Library, are historically significant and worthy of preservation for future generations. All three buildings are structurally sound and can be rehabilitated for a cost which is less than of new construction for similar buildings. And compatible uses can be found for the City Hall building, the Old City Library, while the City Auditorium can be feasibly rehabilitated for use as an arts and cultural center. And finally, hotel, motel tax revenues and the rehabilitation tax credits are available to assist for funding for the rehabilitation of these buildings. And Mayor and Mr. Gardner and I had a meeting about the tax credits. There's a 20% federal tax credit available to help developers and private users buy down the cost of rehabilitation, and a 25% tax credit from the state of Georgia for the same purposes. So there's some substantial tax incentives which would be available to all three of the buildings, because we feel that all three of them are eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. First of all, I'm going to talk about the City Hall building. The historic East Point City Hall building represents an outstanding opportunity for reuse as a possible visitors center and museum for the city of East Point. The ground floor has an impressive entry foyer and retains its historic stairwell. The ground floor and addition provide ample space that is divided into small offices by partition walls. These walls could be easily reconfigured for efficient use as a visitor center, including a small theater where an orientation film about the city and its future economic development opportunities can be shown. The second floor, which holds the old city council chambers, is primarily one large space, making it an ideal configuration for exhibits on the heritage of the city. This use is an outstanding opportunity for the city because it can be funded by hotel-motel tax proceeds. The building is in structurally sound condition and could be converted at a reasonable cost. And I want to say, if the city does not desire to convert the City Hall into a visitor center, it can be easily adapted as an attorney's or other professional office space, and the developer could use the tax credits, which would buy down the cost substantially by 20-25%. The City Auditorium. The historic City Auditorium building is in poor condition. However, our findings of our construction experts is that it is a steel and masonry building, and its structural integrity is intact. The auditorium seats approximately 616 persons downstairs and 300 persons in the balcony. According to the Fox Theater Institute, a 900-seat auditorium is a sweet spot in the performing arts market because it is ideal for the smaller national touring companies, including drama, dance, and musical performances. From a programming perspective, this 900-seat capacity places the auditorium in a category with many other theaters across the state and positions it for block booking opportunities with other Georgia theaters such as the Georgia Southern University Theater in Statesville, the First Theater at Georgia Tech, and Macon's Grand Opera Houses. So what this really means is the Fox Theater Institute runs this booking consortium. So if a great act is coming through the state and they have a booking already in Macon, but they don't have a booking for another 4 days, they share this information with other venues, and you can get and this gets to the next point. The theater also benefits from its proximity to Interstates 85, 75, and 285, not to mention the airport, because many of these touring companies travel on the road in a coach and prefer convenient access to the interstate system. The Fox Theater Institute further recommends that building renovations include ample concession stands, including the sale of alcoholic beverages, because this would be a lucrative revenue stream for the city of East Point. Fox Theater, many of you know, makes very little money on its actual admissions because it's a rental house, but it makes millions of dollars a year on its concession stands. There's a lot of markup in popcorn, let me tell you. East Point's cultural institution, Bal Ethnic, is a proven entity and commonly draws 700 persons to its performances. This group would make an outstanding user of the auditorium. This use is an outstanding opportunity for the city because it can also be funded by hotel-motel tax proceeds. Finally, the library. The historic 1939 library represents an excellent reuse opportunity for the city of East Point. This space lends itself to many different uses, from office space to a restaurant. Consideration should be given to granting a long-term lease to a tenant that would be responsible for the interior renovation of the building, but would pay a revenue stream to the city. Once renovated, the rich interior of this building would make it a signature building for the city of East Point. This building is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places and have developed by a private sector investor eligible for a 20% federal tax credit and 25% state tax credit. And we were absolutely charmed by the beauty of this interior and felt very strongly that we could help you if you all so desire in finding a developer who would take a long-term lease so you would actually not have to sell the building. They would invest all the money in the restoration. It wouldn't cost the city any money whatsoever. But at the end of the lease term would belong to the city, and they would get a renovated building back at the end of the lease term. So the cost estimates are on page 12, and I'm not going to go over these in detail, but we feel, as I said before, very confident that they are defensible cost estimates. It's difficult to do this unless you have someone who is whose profession is this, and so we did have this person on our team. The East Point City Hall, because it's in such good condition, he felt that it could be done for $150 to $175 a square foot, which would put the cost to rehabilitate at $1.5 to $2 million. New construction for this same amount of square footage would result in, I think, a less quality building because they're just simply not building buildings as well as they did in the 1930s. And the cost would be $3,386,000 at $300 a square foot, which is about what it costs to build in Atlanta today. The East Point City Auditorium. This one is the one that's in not as good condition, so we budgeted $175 to $200 a square foot, which puts the cost of rehabilitation at $1.8 to $2.3 million. This compares to building a new auditorium at $3.5 million, so it's a substantial cost savings as well. And finally, the library, and this is the one, of course, that we're recommending that you you outsource or get a third party to do. Construction cost here, this is in pretty good condition. It has a lot of beautiful finishes that you can rehabilitate. 6,400 square feet at $125 to $150 a square foot. $750,000 to $1 million. And if you try to build this building new, it would cost you $2 million. So those are our findings. We hope that y'all will take them into strong consideration, and do hope that this is not the end of our relationship, where Georgia Trust exists for precisely the same thing we're doing tonight, is to help communities, individuals, organizations all across the state bring back their downtowns, bring their historic resources back to life, restore their neighborhoods to their full vitality. And we also have another ally. The former city manager of the city of Savannah, Michael Brown, is now in the consulting business, and he is an absolute expert in finding money in city budgets and finding grants from the state and using the future tax revenue for creation of authorities and bond issues. And he has pledged his his help to the city of East Point pro bono if you decide to take him up on that. So you can just contact me, and I'll get Michael in touch with you. So thank you very much for hearing us out, and I think it's now my turn to introduce Shane Totten. Thank you. Thank you, Shane.
Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. So, little milestone. Last week I celebrated my 16th year living on North Clark Drive. And I moved to East Point because of the vision I saw for East Point, not my personal vision, but for what it could be. As an architect, I'm taught to look at things for the way they could be, not the way they are. And that holds true for what I see in the Civic block, is really looking at the potential and what it could be for our current generation of residents and our future generations of residents. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about sustainable design, we're talking about holistic design. So when you approach something sustainably, you're looking at the big picture. At the same time, you're looking at the small picture. Trees and forest at the same time, so that you understand the interrelationships between these things. And I feel like this is a perfect example of sustainable design at its best. These buildings exist. That's the best sustainability there is. Giving them a new life means that we're not putting all of the detritus from the demolition in the landfill, but that's not really the point of it. The point of it is that these buildings tell a story, and they tell us a story today, but we can choose to write the story for these buildings and what they'll tell future residents of East Point. And so looking at sustainability from a holistic approach, we're talking about energy efficiency, we're talking about water, we're talking about making these buildings less of a burden on the city's budget, because sustainable design is typically built better the first time around. It saves money on utilities and resources, so that translates into potentially higher rents. And that's what we see across the board in our consulting at Southface. The more sustainable and high-performing a building, the healthier it is for people, the more we can charge for it. So we're creating this opportunity for new businesses to come in and occupy these buildings, use these tax incentives, but we also charge them higher rent because they're getting a better building for it. Even though they're paying for the development, we can set the standards, right? We can say what we want these buildings to be because of the vision we have for our city. And so looking at the potential for the sustainability as a contributing factor, we would also look at things like planning, permitting, zoning, all of these opportunities we have, economic development, that lead to the successful reuse of these buildings. We can't just fix the buildings and think that's going to be the end of it. We can't just fix them and walk away from it. There's going to be operating costs, maintenance costs. So we look at the big picture about how we do that. And I think this is just a great example for East Point about what we choose to do for our future. And I'm really excited to spend my next 16 years, maybe not on North Clark, but somewhere in East Point, so that I can look back and say we had a hand in really building downtown for what it could be. And that's a destination that we all have a vision for, right? Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to say a few words. If you look at the 3 loose sheets of paper in the packets, those were profit and loss statements that were sent to me by Carmi McDonald, who is the CEO of the Fox Theater Institute, for similarly sized theaters in Georgia. And you can see that their operating budgets are all over the map. What she told me was that typically, as Mark mentioned, ticket sales are not the primary moneymaker for these theaters, and where the real income potential is from the building rentals, corporate sponsorships, getting grants, donations, and concessions. But the ultimate goal is to have the auditorium be able to pay for itself through these different income generating streams. And the ultimate benefit of having a restored theater downtown is the impact that it has on the greater community, on restaurants and other businesses, by providing an anchor evening activity that people are interested in going to and then flow out and spend money in the surrounding area. I do also want to say that there are several citizens of East Point in the audience who are here to show their support for Saving the Block. This has been a 3-year ongoing effort, and our goal has really been to bring information and experts and resources to the city to be better able to make a decision on saving and restoring these buildings. So we urge the city to move forward with the restoration in earnest, to hire a consultant, and to rehabilitate these 3 very important buildings in our community. And if you have any questions, Mark and Shane are available to answer them.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I don't think we'll have any questions in that it was a presentation format today, but I just want to thank each of you for coming out and spending all the time that you spent in the community, bringing this information back to us. I want to thank Councilmember Shropshire for inviting you all here this evening, and we look forward to the next opportunity that we have to sit down and actually put a plan into place to move it forward. Well, we have this, in that this is a presentation, we don't have any questions. It's not a question and answer session today. So is there a place that we can send you questions?
Right. Absolutely.
Who would like to field those
I'll be
questions?
glad to take any that I can. Now we'll give you my phone number and email address.
And I think once we move into the next phase of this, we could have invite whomever would like to come back to one of our work sessions to, maybe even if we have to have a special call work session to really sit down and hammer out some things. And
I'll send out a follow-up email with contact information for questions.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.
If I could say something.
Yes,
If the city manager, if the city clerk can put this on the work session agenda at the next work session, it's full.
It's over full.
Okay, so
We want to give them time to be able to.
the first work session in November, so we can have a discussion to see where we want to go and look at the options that we can have, that we have. Okay.
And so we'll communicate, and see whether that might be a time where council sits down and discusses it. We'll communicate and whether or not, we have questions at that time. So, yes. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good evening. All right. Great. That was great information. Okay. Next item of business, we have committee reports. Anything up this evening? Okay. Councilmember